If you were to ask me which medium of entertainment has made the biggest splash in the industry over the past decade, I would answer without hesitation, podcasts. Although podcasts have been around since the 1980s and caught their initial wind in the mid-2000s, the 2010s saw the boom that elevated them to a staple of the mainstream media, with programs like The Joe Rogan Experience and This American Life getting multi-million views when their episodes debut, which is something that a lot of big players in television can't even muster up, which is a giant signifier that the internet generation is not only the future, but it is currently the present as well. Speaking of both podcasts and the internet generation, one of the ways you can tell how popular and profitable podcasts are is the fact that every single YouTuber in the world has one. Whether it be David Dobrik, Tiny Meat Gang, Logan Paul, H3H3, or Jenna and Julian, the majority of prominent creators on the platform have delved into the medium for multiple reasons. One, you can put enough sponsors on your podcast to pay your rent for at least a year due to the length of the content, and second, it's the easiest type of content that YouTube creators can put out. Seriously, the effort you need to put in to sit there and talk in a somewhat structured format is less than minimal. And because you've already built up a rapport with your audience, they'll listen to whatever you put out simply because it's you. I've listened to my fair share of YouTuber podcasts. Notice how I am saying YouTuber podcasts and not saying anything about professional ones. And I can say that I can't really enjoy almost 95% of them. The only one that I enjoy is Impulsive, and that's only when they have an interesting guest on and Logan is able to keep his motley crew under control. That being said, in November of 2020, I found one that I almost couldn't believe was real because of how much I adored it through only listening to the first 5 minutes of the first episode, and that is the Sweet Boys podcast. Now, what is Sweet Boys? Well, I don't exactly know what it classifies as in regard to genre, which is something we will be getting to later, but it is the brainchild of Andrew Sawicki and Garrett Watts, two guys who are most heavily known on the internet for their association with the absolute weirdo Shane Dawson. Garrett was someone who was featured extensively in Shane's content for a few years, and Andrew worked as Shane's editor and cinematographer up until the big cancellation bomb of 2020 happened. And although that is what they are most known for, it is important to understand that they did not meet through the Catman, as they were actually best friends for years beforehand. Garrett is the bubbly and wholesome guy who was obsessed with things like Harry Potter, Marvel films, and Japan, while Andrew is the reserved and equally wholesome boy with an incredible talent for filmmaking. The platonic chemistry between the two of them was so palpable on screen that while they had their tenure on Shane's channel, a plethora of compilations appeared on the internet showing just how incredibly well they got along with each other. So it seemed like a pretty natural progression when they announced in October that they were going to be starting a podcast together named Sweet Boys. Since then, the channel has grown exponentially to the point where they are currently at 460,000 subscribers within 3 months, while none of their episodes have gotten under 300,000 views. And that doesn't even count as the audio listeners, which is generally the main demographic of podcast enthusiasts. So to say that the project has been a booming success would be an understatement. I mean, sure, Garrett does have over 3 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, but to see someone who has been so heavily affiliated with another creator to the point where it almost seems like they're a side character succeed at such a high rate in their own ventures is incredibly unprecedented and rather impressive. Now, the next question that would be apt to discuss here is what the podcast is about. I mean, most podcasts revolve around a subject or interest to the hosts, and the podcasts which are more conversation-based thrive off of the fact that the person or persons at the helm are very interesting characters with life experience and or knowledge that one wouldn't be able to receive elsewhere. So, where do Garrett and Andrew fall on that spectrum? Well, as an answer, I would have to tell you that the Sweet Boys podcast is about nothing. And I know people out there will call me out for hyperbole, but in this case, I'm as serious as the prisoner guy from Harry Potter. If you're watching, Garrett, that was especially for you. I think you're wonderful. Anyways, let me paint you a picture. You've just finished a long day of either work or school, and you come over to your best friend's house to spend the night. As soon as the two of you settle in, you immediately embark on a conversation where you just let everything out. Things going on in your life, any little things that have interested you over the past day, you go down a random, continuous, and never-ending rabbit hole of subjects that have absolutely no correlation to each other until it's 4 in the morning and the two of you are so exhausted that you have to go to sleep. That, in a nutshell, is the best way that I can describe Sweet Boys to someone who hasn't listened to it before. It's just two guys shooting the breeze like they would on any given day of the week. Now, is this revolutionary? No, there are a lot of podcasts that are just kind of two people having a conversation, but even in those, I feel like there are at least a couple of talking points that they want to hit on for the framework or a structure that they can follow. This is very much not the same with Garrett and Andrew. One of the ways that you can see this is the manner in which they implement sponsorships into the podcast. Most shows have designated time for ad reads and use them as a way to break up the podcast into segments, using it as TV would for a commercial break. If we compare this to the subject at hand, the ad reads are hastily inserted endpoints that can barely be considered cutoffs, appropriately titled Sponsor Mode, and they are recorded after the initial podcast has concluded, which is an indicator of truly how raw and organic the material being displayed is. They don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, so they just throw in the ads in post, which brings me to my next point, thank you me. I wouldn't call myself a connoisseur of podcasts, but what I can say rather certainly is that I've never heard one that is more natural than this one. I know that I've stated this multiple times throughout this whole video, but it's literally about nothing. And when I brought that up to my friends, they countered with a couple of podcasts that they thought did very similar things. Those counters being Views and Tiny Meat Gang, which are appropriate considering they are both YouTuber podcasts themselves. Although I can see where they're coming from on a surface level, there's a very important distinction to be made that can best be identified by looking at the titles. While the aforementioned shows have titles such as Becoming Joe Rogan or Dating an Adult Actor, Sweet Boys have such titles as The Whole Thing Was a Mistake or We Have No Idea What We're Doing. While the former seems to spend time discussing either other people and entities or crazy stories of what have happened in their life, the latter spend a good chunk of their time getting lost down a spiraled path of random stories or subjects that intertwine with each other to the point where you can't remember what was going on 10 minutes ago. Some people would view that as a negative, and as you can tell from the entirety of this video, I'm not one of those people. There's such a unique charm to it, as these are two guys who have structured their show to the point where it would almost be impossible to be successful. Between the lack of structure and the constant racing tempo that can be difficult to keep up with, that is a pretty big hole to dig yourself into. Yet, through the sheer power of their charisma, chemistry, and relatability to the average person, without coming off as one of those cringy #relatable Instagram posts, they have managed to create one of the only podcasts that I have genuinely enjoyed in years. Good luck and Godspeed on your journey to the top, you two. I can't wait to see you when you get there.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Till next time, be sweet. And see you next week.
Thank you guys so much for watching. First and foremost, if you guys like the video, please subscribe and like it. It would mean the world to me, and I know that it helps when I ask, so yeah. Second matter of business, I would like to thank our patron Weston Kentucky and our producer AJ Ford. If you have any interest in joining the ranks, the link to our Patreon is in the description, which has some pretty solid perks if I do say so myself. We also have the link to all of our social medias, Twitch, Twitter, podcast there as well, if you have any interest in following any of them. I want to thank everyone for their patience and the amazing support that we've been receiving on our stuff. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.